blow this up.
Look alive, Bomb Squad. It is time for Let's Blow This Up Live. I am your host, Jason Sircone, coming to you from the bomb shelter on this lovely Wednesday evening in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're having a great week. Tonight, you know what? I'm just going to go full transparency right out of the gates here. I was supposed to be joined by Mr. Lloyd George. I have not heard hide nor hair of Lloyd, and he has not arrived yet. So I hope everything's okay on his end. And what I'm going to do is, obviously, if he does join me here in the studio, I'll bring him on stage and we will proceed as planned. But I always have a backup plan. So I wanted to take some time tonight. Lloyd and I were going to talk about this anyway, because he's one of the brain children behind the Empowered Podcasting Conference. And if you've been in the zone of Let's Blow This Up Live over the past couple weeks, I spoke with Mark Ronick, who is the main man behind the Empowered Podcasting Group and the conference that is now coming to us in Charlotte, North Carolina, June 28th through 30th. He's assembled a great team, Lloyd being one of those people. So again, if he joins us, we will dig into some things about that conference with him tonight. But also, many other people have been a part of putting that conference together. Last week, I was joined by Matt and Megan Shields. They've played an integral part in putting it together. Next week, I will be joined by Simona Constantini, who is right now in Italy having the time of her life based on her Instagram story. She will be joining me to talk about podcasting, the conference, her journey in the podcasting space. Simona hosts two great podcasts that we'll talk about. I've been a guest on one of them, and maybe someday I'll make an appearance on the other. Time will tell. Tonight, though, again, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the conference as it comes together. I'll be in attendance. I'm going to be doing some emceeing. I'm going to be on the stage. I'm going to be doing a couple things here and there with a panel discussion. But guess what? The plan. Okay, Lloyd just walked away. We'll bring him up here. He just popped in. So we're going to make this happen as planned. Here I am just killing time, but I'll spare you all of the talk about the Empowered Podcasting Conference because we'll be able to get it directly from Lloyd when he joins me on the stage. All right. So now that he is in the house, I'd like to introduce you to the one and only Mr. Lloyd George.
Jason Sircone, how's it going?
What's up, my friend?
How are you?
You're making me sweat. I didn't think you were going to show up.
No, thanks for your patience. I'm sorry for my tardiness.
If there's one thing I can do, it's kill time. I had a backup plan in place just in case. So there's always a plan B. But I'm glad you could join me. It'll be much better if we can rap tonight than me just talking to, not myself. Of course, we're talking to the Bomb Squad, but yeah. Glad to have you on the show, my friend.
No, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I feel like you're a podcaster's podcast. When I used to record my podcast, I'd always just anticipate for one thing always going wrong. In some ways, I always I knew it would be something. So thanks for stalling until I got here. And sorry, I'm late.
No worries. I have learned over the years you need to have a contingency plan. And I've been live streaming for a month. And I think last week was the first full episode where we didn't have any type of glitch. Everything went smoothly. But we're here, and that's all that matters is now that you've joined me to help make a difference this evening in the Bomb Squad's life, and that's what counts.
I appreciate it. I'll save this question for later, but I'm curious if you like live streaming over podcasting more, or which one you prefer.
No, we can dig into that now. I love live streaming. I honestly just did a live stream earlier this week for my other Podcast Theory, talking about some of the things that I've learned in this short period of time doing live streaming. The big thing that I took away from this, and that I continue to take away from this, is the fact that when I'm in this mode of being live, I don't know if it was just this instant click in my head, but I don't overthink things.
Yeah.
When I'm recording with somebody else in a pre-recorded environment, I don't overthink there either. I'm usually just focusing on controlling the conversation.
Yep.
But when I'm solo and I'm recording podcast content pre-recorded, I get in my own head.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I get in my own way because I'm trying to make it perfect and I'm trying to do one thing or another. And I'll say, oh, maybe it'll be better if I say it this way.
Yeah.
And I'm not giving myself that luxury in a live environment. and I love it. So the efficiency is absolutely on point.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I feel like that just goes to show just how much like most podcasters, I think, are probably more on the spectrum of like overthinking things versus the maybe 1% that really do need to like, it needs to be so on point, or we need the perfect camera, or that's such a small percentage of people that I think for most people, we could almost like oversimplify our setup almost.
No question. I think that holds a lot of people back from even starting
Yeah.
because they feel they need state-of-the-art equipment and the best
Yep.
studio. And the story that I can tell you is that you could do this out of your closet.
Yeah.
You could do it without the video feature. I don't recommend that, being 2024
Yep.
and the power that video has. But there are many podcasters, just to get good sound quality, will record straight out of their closet, let the clothing act as noise reduction, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We live in beautiful times that you can actually press a button. This is something I still geek out about. We can press a button and go live to the world.
Yeah,
We didn't have those type of capabilities before. This is still something that I go, oh my God, this is so cool. I get to do this.
And you know what's crazy? I was just thinking about that. And the fact that we're live streaming and there's literally no buffer. It's just like seamless. You can literally can't tell that this is being like live recorded. Just blows my mind.
It's insane. It's something that when I was in college doing radio and television, it was on such a more primitive level. But at the time, what we had felt state of the art, revolutionary. I would love to be in those types of environments now with the technology that's at our disposal. But
yeah,
I guess we're here doing it at our own Sans University.
Right. Exactly. No, I completely agree. Yeah, I was super excited to be here because I felt like we would get the chance to just geek out about podcasting and marketing and all the things. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I think that from what I've learned about you in the short time that I've known you, we have a lot of commonalities on that front. We're both very big on utilizing podcasting for marketing and for networking. I love that you are all about using this platform to build relationships, because that is where it's at. So
literally, that has for me changed my life, I think.
Yeah, I think any podcaster that's really embraced this platform for all the right reasons could say the same thing.
Yep.
I know that the relationships that I've built through this platform go far beyond the actual content that I'm creating. That in the end of the day, it ends up feeling like a nice bonus.
Yeah.
To get all of this great content to listen to whenever we want, share with our audiences. We've been talking about a lot in the podcasting morning chat. The legacy piece of this, we're creating great content for the world to consume long after we've ventured on our way.
Yeah.
There is so much value in that message. So I want to encourage the Bomb Squad. If you're out there watching us tonight, Lloyd's going to be with me till 9 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to have some great conversation around the podcasting front. I want to learn more about what you do by day. As you said, you're a talent manager by day, content creator by night. So
wait, can I ask you one question before we dive into that?
Oh, sure.
Sorry. How did you come up with the name for this live stream?
It's actually goes back to the brand name. I came up with, after an extensive process. So you can go back to the first season of Let's Blow This Up, where I talked with Alexandra Watkins. I talked more about the process of naming my company, Bombtrack Media. It was her guidance. I read her book. I used her system. And after toiling over some names, the name Bombtrack just hit me. I was at the gym. I was working out, and a Rage Against the Machine song came on my playlist. And it wasn't that, it was Killing in the Name. That was the song that hit. But immediately I went, whoa, wait, Bombtrack. And I was in one of those modes where I kept saying it. I'm like, this sounds really cool. It sounds so cool. I'm sure it's taken. And I got done with my workout and I pulled up Google and I searched, and there is a bike company that goes by Bombtrack. And that's all. There was nobody in the media space, nobody in the podcasting space. I felt like there's some legs to this.
Yeah.
And so as I put the idea together and cultivated it, it was probably maybe 3 minutes later. Let's Blow This Up hit me, because that went right along with the whole bomb thing. And I was immediately thinking of the little branding elements that go into it. Explosive content, all kinds of, again, I could go into lots of detail about all these things, but Let's Blow This Up seemed like a natural fit. And since we're live, I just tacked live on it for the live stream. And here we are.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I was curious. Great name. I love it. Just curious about the history.
Thank you. And it did scare me, because I know when I did my research, I always look to see if anybody else has named their podcast this. And it was one of those things where I said, this sounds so good. It's got to
Yeah.
be taken.
Right.
And when I searched, there was a podcast out there said, let's blow this up. And I went, son of a bitch. But then I looked at it. It was a 14-second trailer from some kid named Owen that never did anything with it. And it was 4 years old. And I said, you know what, Owen, I'm taking it, man. Sorry to rain on your parade.
You were like, I'll see you in court if it gets there.
Yeah, we'll see how far Owen takes it. But I don't think he has many legs to stand on. He sounded like he was 5 in the trailer too.
Yeah.
So
That's funny. Wow.
We'll see where things go. But nevertheless, that's how this show came to be, at least from the standpoint of name. And it's all about having these explosive, unscripted conversations. And Lloyd, I'm glad you're with me tonight to make that happen.
Yeah, for sure. Super excited to be here.
For sure. So we're going to dive into some things, but I want you to tell us your story. And again, Bomb Squad out there watching us live, please feel free to contribute your comments, your questions. Lloyd and I will be happy to talk about them. And I want you to be part of the conversation. As always, let's make this as interactive as possible. Lloyd, break it down, my friend.
Cool.
Where are you from? What do you do? How'd you get here? And why are you so passionate about what you do today?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I was originally born in Zimbabwe, which is right above South Africa. So we're the second most south country in Africa. I moved to the United States in 2006, right at the time when I was about 12 years old. Finished middle school, went to high school here, did a semester of college before deciding, yeah, this is not for me. So I got out of that and kind of just dove into the workforce at 19, started working in like the optical industry. And I was very fortunate in the sense that I worked at I was working at an eye doctor's office that I got because one day I was driving past an eye place. And we saw the doctor walking. He was about to walk out of his car and into the eye care place. And he had a white jacket on. And my wife was like, that's the doctor. Like, you should just go talk to him really quick and see if he'll give you a job. So we just parked next to him. We're like, yo, I'm Lloyd. I would love to work here. And he ended up giving me an opportunity. And that was my first job. And I remember the eye care place was in a pretty rich area. And so literally every single day, we maybe saw maybe 15 to 20 patients. And I was the person that got their papers ready and got them ready for the doctor and stuff. And literally every single day for 4 years straight, I was just talking to rich people. That was my entire job all day. And so I started to build relationships, connect with people, and that kind of got me into future opportunities. I actually met a patient one day and she was like, hey, what do you want to do after this? And I'd never even thought about it. I was just like, I don't know. I don't have a degree. And she was like, you know what? You would be really good with my friend so-and-so. She owns a huge finance company. I'll connect the two of you. And she connected us. And literally the next week I had a job. And that's how I got it. I got my start in the corporate startup world. Since then, when I was working at that job, I'd listen to podcasts just to kind of let the time go by. And that was the first time I realized oh my gosh, I love podcasting. This is so cool that I could be working and listening. And I felt like that was the first time I realized how unique of a medium podcasting was, because I'd listened to the Dave Ramsey show and it was they have thousands of hours of episodes that you could listen to. It's very hard to find a YouTube channel that has thousands of hours you could listen to. So I loved that podcasting had so much content that existed. I loved that it was free. I loved that it wasn't visual. And so I knew that the medium was special. And so by the time, this was around 2016, by the time we got to 2018, I decided you know what, I could do this too. I want to go from being a consumer to a podcaster. And so that was when I started my first podcast, Foreign Made. And I feel I realized it just started to change my life. I looked at the way people looked at me. I started to get opportunities I wouldn't normally get just by people realizing that I had a podcast. And this was something that I wanted other people to experience. So in 2021, I started a TikTok, just sharing one podcast tip per day. And that kind of took on a life of its own. I mean, at one point we were getting probably 3 or 4 million views a year, built a community of about 12,000 podcasters. And since then, I've just kind of expounded on this love for podcasting and this love for community, this love for relationships. And that's kind of why and how we're here today.
I believe that relationship aspect, I mean, I'm tracing back to the beginning of your story. This whole thing started just by you having the courage to go up and start a conversation, which led to a relationship. I'm sure that stood out to that doctor. You actually coming out of nowhere and saying, I like this opportunity, please extend it my way.
Yeah,
there's a lot in that.
yeah, that's such a great point. And I'd argue, I'm so curious what you think about this. So I'd argue sometimes that like who you know is probably far more valuable than what you know, like your actual skill set, because
Mhm.
people may not know like how good you are at something, but if they like you, they'll still give you the opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I've always felt like that works. I like that. I don't think that that's a bad thing. And that's, I've always just tried to like embrace that aspect of who I am.
I think there's a ton of value in that. I believe that it's the old saying, your net worth is your network, right? Call it cliche, call it what you will, but there's still something to that.
Yep.
I know that networking became a big part of my life in 2024. I came into this year having just launched Bombtrack Media, and a lot of the work that I had been doing freelance style had been digitally because of COVID.
Yep.
I had some clients locally that I'd worked with, but also I was doing consulting and helping people with production and guesting through the computer. Some people I've worked with still haven't met them in real life, and
Yeah.
I'll meet a few of them in a couple of weeks when we're in Charlotte, which is really cool. But I knew when I was taking this new brand live, I had to get out and start making some new relationships, because prior to COVID, and even through the first part of COVID, I was working in the beer space. I was working
Mm,
with some of the local breweries here in Pittsburgh, doing some of their sales and helping
yeah.
them with product placement and things like that. And COVID came along and blew that up. No pun
Yeah.
intended, or maybe pun intended. That all
Mhm.
fits. So I had to shift gears and take a new course. And that's when I
Yeah.
decided that I was going to lean into podcasting full time. I had been doing it since 2015. It was part of my beer building industry. I had a beer podcast at the time where I was talking with industry experts and different people in that field. And I just parlayed that experience into more of a full time thing.
Yeah.
I knew that I had to get out and meet some people that were in other businesses that I wanted to connect with. So
Yeah.
networking was the logical choice. And I set myself up to be at least one live networking event per week.
Mm.
And that led me to a great BNI group that I'm a part of here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, VNI. Do you want to
Yeah.
explain for people what that is for the people that may not know?
Yeah, absolutely. It stands for Business Networking International. And that international part is one of the big things that I love about being part of the group, because our local chapter is fantastic. But I've made a connection with a gentleman in San Francisco, and we're going to work
Mm,
on a podcast for him come fall. I actually connected with somebody in the Philippines
yep.
about partnering up and doing some work. So that international part of the networking and BNI has been great so far. But every
Wow.
week I'm in front of 50 to 60 people sharing ideas, making connections, helping
Yeah.
with referrals, giving referrals, gaining referrals. The BNI saying is givers gain.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've really tried to focus on as much as I possibly can. And even
Yeah.
if it's not giving a referral, trying to give knowledge, give
Yeah.
feedback, give some form of help that ultimately cultivates a relationship so the know, like, and trust factor can grow.
Yeah.
That
And I
networking piece is huge.
I so agree with that. And I feel like I think to be in BNI and excel, you kind of have to have like the right mindset. And I think that's very similar to any relationship. And for
Mhm.
those of you that may be watching this, essentially like you show up to this group each week, you kind of say what you do so that the people there understand and they know it. And then everyone goes around and says what they're looking for. So you may need referrals for a specific industry. So you may think, oh, my Aunt Sally actually works in a bank. I'll connect you. And each person goes around the room. So everyone tries to help each other. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's one of the environments where like the more generous you are in just like saying like, oh, let me help this person, let me help this person, let me help this person. It's almost like reverse math where it doesn't maybe logically add up, but in the grand scheme of it all, it does end up being like net positive towards people also trying to help you.
Mhm.
And so I feel like that's also very similar to relationships just outside of BNI as well.
Certainly. And what I've learned in my short 3 months and change being part of the BNI community is that you can gain a lot by being active in the room during your 90-minute meeting, but you can't be a 90-minute member and expect to succeed. They've
Yeah.
built a pretty powerful system that has helped many people. And if you're not tapping into that system and meeting people outside of that 90-minute meeting and forging relationships in a more powerful way, that was the big thing. I gravitated to the one-to-one meetings
Yeah.
immediately and have been trying to do at least a few of those a week just to build those relationships and to keep forging on to see what can come next. Because if you're not willing to have those conversations, you don't know what it can lead to. And that's to shift the gears to podcasting, I look at podcasts as the strongest, most powerful digital networking platform at our disposal.
Yeah.
If you use it right, which was actually the theme of my show today, which was inspired by a conversation that I had with Lindsay Phillips, who was a connection I just made via LinkedIn. We had a conversation earlier this morning about not using podcasting for the right reasons. And if you're not getting all the meat off the bone, you're leaving opportunity on the table. And if you don't use this for networking and try to take these collaborations to the next level and establish powerful relationships, absolutely going to miss out on some big opportunities.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, gosh, that's so much. I agree with everything you just said. And I wish people spoke about that more, that podcasting is simply just a tool. And I think we all know, like, I see people mainly using it to like get followers, get notoriety, but there's so many ways beyond that you can use. And I'm hoping that soon enough, people start being like creative and unorthodox with like how they choose to use podcasting.
Agreed.
I feel like for me, the intangible things that come from podcasting have been the most valuable. So it's not necessarily that like 10,000 people are going to listen to my episode, but the 5 important people that are decision makers are the ones that are going to say like, oh crap, this guy really knows what he's talking about. And that is, I think, what makes it worth it for me. And sometimes like, you may not always know what those people are or what those, like how the benefit is when you start, and that's still okay. That's what I always encourage people, that this is a journey you're going on, and eventually at some point it'll all kind of connect.
What needs to happen is conversations like this need to be had at the beginning. And this is where I feel that any aspiring podcaster that wants to really do this, or even if you've started and maybe you're spinning your wheels, it makes sense to connect with someone like Lloyd, someone like myself. There's a lot of us out there, many of us doing the Empowered Podcasting Conference here in a couple of weeks. We've been down this road. We've put our knowledge to the test, and now we're utilizing it in a way that can help somebody do this right. If you have these types of conversations in the early part of the game, before a microphone is ever purchased or a record button is ever pressed, it's going to set up more realistic expectations.
Yep.
I think that combined with breaking this mindset of downloads meaning everything,
could
change the game for so many content creators out there. What say you, Lloyd?
I totally agree. I think downloads are overvalued. It's ironic that I'm saying that, considering that most of how I monetize my brand is through like brand deals, partnerships, where downloads are the most valued. But I certainly think across the board, we put too much emphasis on like downloads. And from what I could tell, they aren't always the most important thing, while they are important. One metric that I have found that I do think is important, I'll actually just give like 2 or 3 if you don't mind. The first is just, I think like consistency. And I think sometimes you can have a podcast that doesn't have that many downloads and quite frankly, isn't that amazing. It can't be terrible, but it doesn't have to be like NPR level. But if you're consistent, I think that people resonate with that a lot more. By far, like the number one compliment I get is like, man, it's fascinating like how consistent you are. They never say like it's fascinating how good you are. It's fascinating how, great that episode was. It's just always consistency. And so I think there's something subconsciously about just seeing something over and over and over and over and associating that with whatever. And then I think the second metric that I think people should start paying attention to is depth. And so I think podcasting, there's lots of other platforms where you can get lots of numbers, but they aren't lots of platforms where you can get like deep level of information about a specific thing. And I think podcasting is the perfect medium for that. If you're a lawyer and you make tips on TikTok, you need to be chatting with Jason about how you can expound on some of those topics on your podcast.
What I think needs to be looked at more, at least from your perspective, and this is why I think this is a perfect time to bring this up, because of what you just mentioned, the fact that download metrics, they are important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not disqualifying them completely, but it's a question of when they become important.
Yeah.
In your case, as you laid out your story and got to those brand deals, how many years of experience and how much just bank of content have you put together before you got to that point where you had something to present and achieve and obtain those brand deals? I don't even want to say how many episodes. That's probably a hard thing to nail completely, but you had some years of experience behind you before those all became reality, correct?
That's actually probably the biggest misnomer I hear. I actually started from like the jump, like with zero. And so I think when it comes to brand deals, it's less how much content you've published and more how creative you can be in pitching. So, for example, my first podcast in 2018 called Foreign Made. Before the podcast even launched, I was already approaching brands. The podcast was called Foreign Made, and it was centered around like highlighting immigrants that were doing really cool things in the community. And so before the podcast launched, I went to the city of Atlanta because they had an immigrant program. I went to the American Jewish Committee because they also had an immigrant program. And then I went to an organization called Forward, which is like an immigrant advocacy organization. And I basically told all of them like, hey, I'm launching this podcast. It hasn't launched yet, but these are the people we're going to have as guests in season one. For example, here's my pitch. I told them that like, hey, even though I have 0 downloads right now, if you look at like all of the followers that are coming on the podcast and you add all of their followers together, we have a total follower count of 21 million. Even if only 10% of these people share this with their community, that would still be over 200,000 views towards the podcast. And so just kind of like finding creative ways to sell that idea, I think is more important. If you have a podcast for men, as an example, you should be approaching Gillette or Man Cave or all of these brands that centered around creating content for men and saying, hey, we're going to be having conversations around X, your brand would integrate perfectly. In a world where like brands need content that looks authentic, that is invaluable.
I'm reminded of a post that you put on LinkedIn now that you bring that up. And I remember it because I saved it because I thought it was incredibly genius. And it's centered around what you just explained. The fact that if you can find a creative way to get your brand and your podcast in front of somebody with this mindset of maybe the return monetarily is not going to be huge right away, but you're going to grow along with us. And if you factor in the potential audience your podcast could bring, even if a small section of that were to promote this business, promote that podcast, get that exposure out there, there's a lot to be gained there. So lesson here is to set the proper expectations. Don't go to a company. I'm sure you didn't go asking for thousands of dollars on that initial deal, or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I've been wrong once already here. Was I?
Yeah. No. That's hilarious. And I think so the way I structured it, and this is how I would structure it again in the future if I were to do this, would be to like sell a bucket of episodes. And I think this is something MailChimp did a long time ago. They would sponsor like an entire season of episodes versus one season. And that's kind of what I did. I had a total of 8 episodes, and all 3 brands all 3 brands were sponsors on every single episode. And so for the entire season, I made a total of $3,500. I think one brand paid, I made a total of, I think, $4,500 because one brand paid me, it was $4,000. That's what it was. One brand paid me $500. One brand paid me $3,500. And then the city of Atlanta said, we can afford to pay you, but we will like share it with our email list. And so that's the way I would like bucket it as like for like the whole season. Like you're going to be at the beginning of every single episode this season, which is themed around X.
And I think you just nailed the perfect reason why podcasters should look at seasons as their primary way of producing content. The advantages behind it, on top of what you just named, Lloyd, this is something that I built the whole model of Bombtrack Media around when it comes to production, especially if you're new. Coming into this fresh and taking on that full-time podcaster schedule of being there every week, maybe even twice a week because a guru on Instagram said you should do it, is a huge undertaking, especially if you've got other responsibilities work-wise, personal-wise. Obviously, there's a lot to juggle. Podcasting does not need to be an anchor. It should be something that serves you. And it's much easier to produce something in a season format and put it out there very themed, very tightly focused. Let it serve as an asset for all that you do, and don't put the stress on yourself to constantly be producing just because someone else said that's how you have to podcast.
I couldn't agree more.
Right. Like, and plus that whole sponsorship factor doesn't come down to just one episode. It comes down to a full season, and there are plenty more ways to package the value of that than just saying, hey, we'll run an ad for you on one episode and hope it gets viral or goes viral.
Yeah, exactly. 1000%. And then I think like there's so many ways you can get creative. And I think like, for instance, like say you do go to a brand and you say like, you know what, I'll sell you these 8 episodes and it's going to be $1,000. If you're starting out, like that might be a good price, but if you're established, that may not be worth your time. If they say, you know what, we are kind of interesting. This is interesting. Like, I think we want to do that. You can then easily say like, okay, fantastic. One of the things I realized is it takes my audience about 3 times to see something before they fully trust me on it. So would you also like to sponsor my newsletter or a LinkedIn post or an Instagram post? Because the more times they see it, the more likely they are to engage with it. And so I just think there's so many opportunities to be creative with how you structure pricing as a creator. I'm making a post tomorrow and I'm so curious to hear what you think about this. I sometimes feel like people outside of the podcast industry see the value of podcasting more than people in the industry. For example, the number of brands that message me and say like, hey, we want to pay you to pretend like you're on a podcast talking about a specific thing, because we feel like when it feels like you're on a podcast and you're bringing out something authentically or naturally, that's worth more than just saying, hey, here's a drink, buy this drink and I'm Lloyd. And so I think the fact that other brands that aren't in the podcast space see the value in authentic conversations in podcasting, it bogs my mind that actual podcasters don't have the same confidence in going to ask for money.
I think it's crazy. I think that's a very valuable post, and it's something that needs to be talked about more, especially in a world where so much of the content that we're seeing now is AI generated.
Yep.
So the more authentic something can be, the more authentic something can feel. I believe there's more value in that. And, we're already in a world where we're trying to figure out, how do you stop somebody's scroll?
Yep.
You have to get something in front of them that makes them at least stop and take notice, and hopefully you can grab their attention in a second or two, or they're on to the next thing.
Yep.
I think we're probably entering into a world where it's going to be even more AI generated material that I know I'm already like, I don't give a shit about this. Give me something that I know is real.
Yeah.
Now, not denigrating AI in any way. I'm just saying, I think from the psychological side of how a human looks at content, absolutely that authentic message coming from a real person having a real conversation is going to resonate much more, because we're already inclined to scroll past ads. We've been doing that for years before
Literally.
social media was a thing. When they came on the television set, we got up and got a snack. We went to the bathroom. That was break time.
Yeah.
Unless you're watching the Super Bowl, typically you're skipping past the ads.
Literally.
So and it was typically something that would grab your attention, was a person telling you a story, something that grabbed you, something that gripped you. You think about, like, the one that always comes to mind, because I know Mark Ronick made a hilarious spoof about it, was the old Sarah McLachlan SPCA ad with Sarah McLachlan's angel playing in the background. And oh man, I'm trying to think. Mark did it for podcasters. I'm sure if he's watching, he could pull this up and reshare it, because it's still relevant to this day.
Yeah.
But Sarah McLachlan, with her song playing in the background, was talking about the values of the SPCA and how they help animals. And that ad always just grabbed you. It just had this thing, right? And that's where I feel there's value in still building content in that respect, to where if you can get somebody's attention with an authentic, true story, it's going to do wonders. It's going to do much more in regards to positioning your brand for what you want it to be, versus something AI generated, or something, like you said, it's just pre-scripted and hey, look at me, I'm drinking this and you should too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think there's so much room to be a little more creative with how we come up with our ads, to your point, which I view as a good thing. That, like, the fact that ads are stale is just great. Like, that creates such an open playing field for people that want to be creative. And I've always found like that the areas that are the most saturated are the areas where you can find opportunity. It's like you want to play in the margins. And I think not enough people are doing that yet, which I think is a great thing for people like us that are talking about this.
For sure. And I encourage anybody watching, or whether live or on the replay part of this, go back and watch and listen to my conversation with Matt and Megan Shields last week.
Yep.
Their emphasis is working with podcasters, because, as Megan puts it, podcasters have so much content to work with.
Yeah.
So if you are already creating a podcast, you have got so much material at your fingertips that you could use for advertising, to potentially get brand deals, to really tap into the monetization side of things.
Yep.
If you're thinking about doing a podcast, these are just a few of the reasons why. There's the monetization side, of course, but there's also that underlying factor of the relationships that come from doing this right. We've talked about that tonight. I think we could probably sit here and do a back and forth rapid fire about the different benefits that we've lived and anybody else would experience if they did this too. And we could sit here all night doing that and not stop. But I don't think we have to play that game. I think it just speaks for itself.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, speaking of finding different, like prioritizing different metrics over downloads, so I shared my top ones, but I'm curious to hear what some of yours are.
Well, I think for me, it always has been about the networking feature. The fact that I know every time I do something like this, I'm getting to connect with a like-minded individual. I get to have a very engaging, captivating conversation. A big challenge that I always put on myself, at least what I've been doing with Let's Blow This Up, is to do this unscripted. I didn't want to come into these conversations with this pre-written agenda of I have to get all of these questions asked in order for this to be successful.
Yeah.
I'm pulling a lot of inspiration from when I listen to Rogan.
Yep.
They're just riffing, and
yeah.
I'm not looking to go 3 hours, but I feel there's a lot of value in that if you can do it, if you can hold the conversation. And for me, it's all about exercising my conversational skills, my active listening skills. And this is something that I practice far beyond the podcasting front. You know, if I'm at the grocery store, I'm engaging with the cashier and talking to them and asking how their day is. It's almost in my head. It's like a little mini 2-minute podcast.
Yeah.
And that makes their day in some cases, because most people just put their heads down, or they have their earbuds in, or they're on the phone, which is rude as hell. But I feel like there's so much more to it. If you think deeper about the podcasting game as a whole, you can get better at it outside of just being on the microphone. But I would say, in addition to the networking side of this and the relationship building that comes from it, it's the repurposable content that you get. It's so versatile what you can create from one podcast episode. You're talking videos, you're talking the audio, you're talking the written component, which can become emails and newsletters and blog posts and social posts and you name it across the board. There's just so much you can do with this content. It's all about understanding how to use it right. That's one of the big pillars of Bombtrack Media. Is this is not just turning on a microphone and putting out a podcast for the hell of it. We are purpose driven, and you're going to get maximum value because this content is going to be a brand pillar that you can utilize across your entire digital footprint. That, to me, makes podcasting a much more valuable entity than many people give it credit for.
No, I completely agree. And what's crazy is it's still so early in its infancy that it's only going to get like crazier.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, it's wild.
Let me ask you this, Lloyd. This is a little off the wall question, because there's no way to really put a definite answer on it. It's just something that I think about a lot. We're 20 years and change into podcasting being a thing. Obviously, it's experienced a huge evolution over that 20-year period. We're still very wild, wild west to a degree. We're able to do a lot of things that maybe someday we won't be able to do, because I have a feeling at some point regulation is going to come to this medium, much like it has all other forms of media. What are your thoughts? Do you think this is a platform that one day is going to face those types of regulations, or will we continue to be able to be creative and operate in the capacity that we are now?
Definitely not. I think for sure there's going to be like regulation coming. And I think countries that are more proactive with their regulation, and by the way, I'm not like agreeing or disagreeing with any decisions of any other countries, but I am just noting that there are countries like Canada being a good example of like countries, or even like the UK in some ways, countries that are more proactive and like legislation within podcasting. So I think we'll also start to see that stateside as well. I just think that as the medium continues to grow, we're going to need regulation. When you think about how powerful podcasting is and the reach that it has, the fact that you can say kind of whatever you want with very little ramifications, I think is going to make it very difficult for podcasting to continue to grow and be commercially viable, especially when you think about just simple things. Like if you're a podcast business, like say you ran a podcast that makes $1 million a year, how do you get insurance for your podcast? Like we don't want podcasting to be viewed in the same category as like gambling from like a risk standpoint. We want it to be viewed as like commercially viable. And so I think that like the more regulation we get, the more likely that will be that this will be like a safe and functional industry. And so I'm optimistic that like we'll have more legislation, and hopefully like it's legislation made by people that are conscious and aware of the space and how it operates.
Do you think that impacts a creator that does not get involved now? Because the advice I typically give, if you think about that angle, and again, no way of knowing when or how or what it becomes in regards to regulation, but if you're off and running and you already have your foot planted in the ground and you're doing something to bring content to life, do you think us being in that position, we're better off than someone that is doing nothing with it and now regulation is in place, they have to get started? Do you think
I actually think you're worse off potentially. And I'd love to hear your opinion with this, because I think that, say for instance, right now you're taking music and you're putting it into your podcast that isn't copyright friendly. Eventually, when the laws and the software, the AI software that's able to detect music patterns, eventually when it catches up with podcasting, and now they can go back and detect sort of people that have like used music without the correct permissions. I think there's like a level of liability and risk, versus right now we're all just kind of taking that risk because it's like, whatever. By the time if my podcast does become $1 million podcast because I have this amazing music in it, I'll worry about that problem later down the road. So I think there's a lot of things like that I think like potentially could be harder for people that started so early. Even right now, if you think about what people were doing in podcasting 2017, it's so vastly different than what people are doing in podcasting now. An example of this, it being like audio only. So we could argue that like if people that started then were at a disadvantage a little bit than if you start right now and you're only on YouTube. So I go back and forth on that though, because even with me knowing that you could be at a risk or a negative a little bit, that there's still no better time to start than right now, even with that context.
Yeah, I gotta ask, when you say music, are you talking? Because my thought on this, I tell anyone, don't risk it, because even at the stage we're at now, if you get caught, they're taking your whole show down.
Yep.
That could be years of work. And coming from a guy that did not lose his work because of copyright infringement, my server, actually, no, I think I had podcast content in there as well. The server that I worked with had a breach, and I didn't have my website. I had 2 websites that were not backed up properly. I lost 8 years of work.
Wow.
I was able to use the go back machine or whatever the hell it's called and retrieve some of it. But even that was choppy, and I had to massage it a little bit to get it to where it was. It was demoralizing to think that all that time that I spent building that content up was gone. Yeah. And again, not that I did anything wrong, but I'm thinking from a podcaster's perspective, if you're neglecting potential copyright issues, just seeing if you can roll the dice and get away with it, that's silly. Do not go down that path, because you are going to get busted. Is that what you were referring to in regards to music? Because I know, I'll throw this out there because I see it more and more. You probably see this in your social media journeys as well. There are a lot of accounts that are using full clips from television shows,
literally,
and movies. Are they given permission to do this?
I am now aware that there's a lot of like larger record labels and stuff that have like publishing licensing specifically for podcasting. So you might, for instance, I don't know specifically, but say you might pay $2,500 to Sony Music, and they might then say like, okay, you can use this batch of songs in your podcast for this many seconds. But not including those people, I do also see people that are, what's up, Mark? I do also see people that are like using songs, using clips from movies in their podcast. And I get why. I think for you and I, we're at an advantage a bit because we have a more business-centric podcast. But I have a friend who has a music podcast and they review music. And so technically, if I'm not mistaken, by law, they can talk about play a specific song if they reference the song for up to 6 seconds, and they don't follow any of those rules. They just like they play it as long as they want. They like go back, they bring it back, they include clips. And I just think it adds so much entertainment value to like why I'm watching it, that if it didn't have those things, I probably wouldn't watch it. So I get why they do it. I don't agree with it, but I understand how much more important it is for a podcast like that versus maybe you and I.
Makes sense. The thing that makes me laugh is I see a lot of podcasts that are doing breakdowns of television shows and they're playing the actual clips of the shows in audio format. And one that I think of because I listen to it because I love these guys. It's called Ruining Seinfeld. And I'm friends with the guy that runs it on Instagram, and we're always going back and forth with quotes, and it's just fun to listen to.
Yeah. What's it about, by the way? Give it a quick plug.
Oh, they break the shit down. I mean, they are, and it's called Ruining Seinfeld because they go into so much detail about every scene, but they're playing the literal clips, and so you're reliving it. If you've seen it as many times as me and most Seinfeld fans, you can visualize exactly what is happening just by hearing it. But I look at that. But then Talking Sopranos, which was actually done by two people on The Sopranos, Michael Imperioli and Steve Sciarippa, they did show-by-show breakdowns, but they never played any clips. They just they watched them. And the thing that this is a sidebar, they even said they hadn't watched the show themselves in like 20 years before they did that. They had to rewatch the thing because they had forgotten so much, which it's from a creator's standpoint. I sometimes I can think of podcast episodes I did 5 years ago and recall parts of the conversation, and it just blew my mind that they had to go back and watch all this stuff because they needed to refresh their own memory. But
that's insane,
right? But they don't have any clips playing, so I've never really understood what you could do, what you can't do. Are you running a risk, or were you given permission? There's so much to it that I would rather just focus on the conversation that I'm having with somebody, because no one's going to yell at us for this. Maybe they don't like what we're saying, but they're not going to yell at us and cancel us for it.
Yeah. And back to like the not having, that's like part of when I say like I hope that there's more regulation. I think those are some of the things that I think we all want clarified. Like if we use a clip or if we don't, what happens? And I don't think there's anyone that like no governing body has like put that in place. But I also think too that like I don't know that I would do this per se. Actually, maybe I would. I think one benefit of like time progressing like it is, I remember like a year and a half ago when I was at a conference and they were having a talk on stage about copyright music in the world of podcasting. And at the time, there weren't that many websites that had like royalty-free music. But now there's so many websites. Like there's a website called Upbeat, and they have like real like professional music that you hear on radio. So you still pay like your monthly subscription for $10.99, and you can use like actual songs by Justin Bieber, Katy Perry, so on and so forth. The fact that that exists and you can do that is pretty, it makes it so much easier for us. And I think it's probably going to be even more advanced a year from now.
I agree. That to me, if you're going to do it right. That's the advice I would give any podcaster. Don't roll those dice, because I'm telling you, having experienced it, not from the standpoint of actually doing something wrong, it sucks. So if you do experience because you did something wrong, you deserve it. Don't put yourself in that position. Do it right.
Not worth the risk.
Not worth the risk whatsoever. But I'll tell you what's worth the risk. Watch me segue. Getting a ticket to the Empowered Podcasting Conference taking place June 28th through 30th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Lloyd, I know you're playing a major role in putting that conference together. I think that's the third time I've called it a concert. So somebody's going to have to play some music at this damn thing just to make sure I'm right. But this conference is going to be something brand new, focused on the independent podcaster. It's going to be a lot of just a wealth of information being shared throughout the weekend. I know I'm looking forward to being there, not just for the fact that I'm going to get to meet some new people, but getting to learn from so many great podcasters. You can't help but walk away from those things with a few aha moments. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes from the event in Charlotte. But tell us from your perspective. We've heard from Mark. We've heard from Megan. We're going to hear from Simona next week. How's it been putting this together? And what are you most looking forward to as we soon to convene in Charlotte,
by the way, I can't wait to meet you in person as well,
Yes,
considering
sir.
that we've only met virtually.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the thing I'm most excited about. There's so many people that I've never met in person, and this will be a great opportunity for that.
Mhm.
Putting this conference together has been uh, surprisingly not as difficult as I thought. And I think that's only because we have such a great team behind it.
Right
And
on.
as you mentioned, you had Megan, who's helping us with marketing and ads, and Mark, who's our co-founders, Simona and Dominic, co-founders
Mhm.
as well. So Nick Nalback, Sid Meadows. I mean, so many people that everyone here is probably familiar with that are helping bring this to life. And so it's been a great experience from that regard. I also think that a lot of times we are often critical about how other people do things. So we say things like, man, I wish this conference had X, or I wish they did this, or I would love if someone had spoke about X. And so I think being in a position now where you can kind of choose like, man, this is what I would envision to be like the most perfect conference with the resources that we have right now. This was
Yeah.
my opportunity to do that. And I'm pretty happy with like what we've come up with.
I love Mark's mindset that he told me his thing was screw it, I'll do it myself. Having those thoughts, and not that he was doing it on his own. Obviously, he's
Yeah.
assembled a great team to help him bring this vision to life. But I think we've all had that feeling with a lot of the bigger established podcasts that there are some elements that are probably good, but there's more elements that were maybe, I don't know if they're really feeling this or digging this. But
Yeah.
if you
That
have
sounds like Mark.
well, the thing that I love about Mark's mentality with this is something that I believe it's just something that it's a stigma in our world is that people will constantly have have these opinions about this sucks. This could
Yeah.
be so much better. Well, okay, if you feel that way, do something about it. Well, I don't have that kind of time. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know like what I would do. Like, okay, well, then shut up or stand up and do something about it. And he
Right.
and Mark did, and got you guys on board with doing the same thing. So
Yeah. One
it's good.
question I've been asking myself recently, even with my partnership with Mark, even with like planning this conference, even just with like trying to anticipate what this conference is going to be like. Naturally, I'd say I'm a pretty like cautious person. Like by trade, I'm a project manager, so I'm like very like I like numbers and details, and you don't always get those things when you're planning a conference. And so that naturally, my default is to just say like I don't know if this is going to go right, or I don't know how this is going to work out. But one
Mhm.
question I've been asking myself lately is like, what if it's freaking amazing? Like, what if it all works out? What if it happens better than you anticipated? And so as I think about, this is my first time working with Mark, and I think this just speaks to the, like, I wish more people would like collaborate often, because with Mark, this is our first time like working together. And I think like there's a level of like caution everyone should have going into a partnership. But this relationship has like turned out like better than I could have anticipated. Like we work well together. And so this is all stuff we wouldn't have known had we not like done this. Same for the
Right.
conference. It's like the number of people that we have speaking, like the roster of like attendees speaking. It's we couldn't have anticipated to have this good of a lineup. So I'm just excited
Yeah.
all around. And if you're listening, I would love to have you there. I'd love to have you join us. In fact, if you DM me, I will get you a discounted ticket.
Ooh, well, that's an offer everyone should take advantage of. So I will make sure that you can connect with Lloyd via the show notes. If you're not watching live, if you're catching this on replay, you'll be able to connect and take advantage of that offer. And as Mark is pointing out to us, Lloyd, you can't hide, my friend. You are apparently playing a huge part in making this happen. So no, modesty is not allowed to follow you around this evening.
That's
One thing
pretty.
I wanted to touch on, and Mark brought this up this morning in the podcasting morning chat, you guys did something pretty cool, and Sid Meadows is to thank for this. You did 2 scholarships for this event where everything from the ticket to the room to the travel was all covered just because the people that the 2 women that won these scholarships submitted a strong reason why they wanted to be a part of this event. I've never seen that before. I thought it was awesome. I think a lot of times what you might see is, hey, we're going to do a giveaway and do 2 tickets. Like we'll
Yeah.
randomly draw your name. You have to follow us on our social media, whatever.
Yeah.
This was actually tapping into one of the strong reasons why podcasting is so huge. It's that community aspect. Why do you
Yeah.
want to be a part of this community and be here? And if
Yeah.
you're struggling to get here, we want to get you here. I think what you guys did there is extremely commendable.
Wow, thank you so much for saying that. I think there are part of like what I loved about this conference is me and Mark really got the opportunity to dream and just like at the start of the conference, we asked ourselves a lot of questions like, man, if there were no limitations, what would we want this conference to look like? And I think just like the ability for everyone to feel like they can attend. I think with other conferences, sometimes it's whether it be like price or not knowing anyone, it could be difficult to attend. And so we wanted the opposite of that. Like we wanted anyone to feel like they can attend. We didn't want money to be a limiting factor. We wanted people to feel welcome when we got there. We wanted people to feel like there was great food and great entertainment, but also feel like they're learning a lot. And so I think we really got to like dream and try and like bring our vision to life, which was one of the more exciting aspects.
Beautiful. Well, we are just, well, I think upon my arrival, it's 15. So what, 16 days away
Oh my gosh.
from this, right? So this
That's
is about to
crazy.
be real. So I encourage anybody watching live or checking out the replay, visit empoweredpodcasting.com, learn more about this fantastic event, then connect with Lloyd. As you learned, he has an offer for you. So take advantage and come join us and have some fun. It's going to be a good time. As I
It's
said
going to be
last week,
fantastic.
we'll leave the light on for you. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. And thank you so much for having me on your show so I can even talk about this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to jump in. I know it was last minute, right up till even when we got started on how this all came together, but I'm glad we were able to make it happen. I do have to ask, I don't know if you know the answer to this. Do they have a pickleball court at the Hyatt? You and me one-on-one, my friend, if they do.
Yeah, you know what? That is like a perfect reminder. I actually need to check on that. I actually, ironically, like I've been playing a lot of pickleball and I tore my rotator cuff, so I
Oh,
probably
damn.
won't be playing. But I will
Shit.
definitely check if they have a court because that would be. I don't know why I didn't think of that. That would be
Well, it's
amazing.
funny. I honestly have not played pickleball yet. I
Okay.
have played. I've been playing tennis since I was a kid,
Oh, if you
and
play tennis, you'll love it.
well, and that's what I figured. And I played it with my nephew in my sister's driveway,
Yep.
and it was a little kid's racket, and it took me a few reps, and then I said, let me see what if I can do this, and I
Yeah.
put this wicked top spin on it, and it like hit the ground and shot over his head. He's 6,
Yeah.
and he's like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? So I just had to see if I could do it,
I feel like,
and
and I don't know if you'll agree with this, but I feel like it requires more discipline than tennis. But I think
yeah.
there's more action than tennis because it's
But
just it's such a fast game that like you're volleying and then it's just like goes out of chaos. But I think the urge not to slam it every single time and just like tap it is so
yeah,
much harder than in tennis.
interesting. It's practically table tennis, right? Like you're jumping up on the table, and that's pretty much the court space too. If I'm
Yeah,
from what I've seen, again, I haven't had anybody to play with.
yeah,
I'd love to
that's
do
the tough
this
part.
more. Oh, look at this. We got some feedback. There's a
Yeah,
pickleball bar 2 miles from where we'll be.
gosh,
Well,
maybe we'll organize a pickleball game. That would be actually pretty cool.
which one of us can come home with something broken? You've already got the torn rotator cuff. Maybe I can join you on the show.
Yeah, yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Well, maybe our Thursday plans have been officially set because Matt and
Right,
I were talking last week when we got done live streaming about what we're going to do when yours truly arrives in Charlotte. We may have just answered that question.
right. No, that sounds phenomenal. All the gyms around me are all converting their tennis courts to pickleball courts, so it's like, why
Yeah,
not?
that's there's one thing about that though. I mean, it's probably because of the popularity of the sport, obviously. But if having not played it, I just from what I know about it, I still think I'd rather play tennis. That's just me. I don't
I
know.
I literally was I'm a diehard. I played like high school, middle school, college.
Yeah,
Like I'm a diehard tennis fan. So I felt the exact same way. In fact, I had a little resentment towards pickleball, like because everyone kept like talking about it.
yeah.
And the moment I played pickleball, I was like, okay,
I
I'm
feel like I'm
probably
gonna.
never gonna play tennis again.
I really.
Yes.
Wow,
I just
that's
can't fathom in my head. And my brother literally he's training for a few like pro tournaments. So he's always like asking me to train with him. And I just can't in my mind justify going to play knowing that it'll be less fun and more work.
that is interesting, and it's funny the one that I haven't really mentioned that I would prefer. I mean, again, not having the frame of reference with pickleball, but over tennis is racquetball.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love playing racquetball. Just
Yeah.
love it.
Do you normally, and I think part of the difficulty with tennis too is I feel like with tennis, I feel like you need to know someone to go, like you need to go to the court
Bingo.
with someone. With
Yep.
pickleball, it's so social that it's like everyone at my club is like we're all friends that kind of know each other, and I could be friends with people in different age demographics, different races, and we all just
Yeah.
like hang out. I love like the communal aspect of it, and I don't know that I find that in tennis that much, but I feel like with
Interesting.
racquetball, you kind of find that as well, where it's like, hey, we all play at the same gym club or at the
Yeah.
same court. Have you ever played paddle?
No.
Okay, it's like kind of like racket. It's like a mixture of racquetball and pickleball, but
Okay.
like the racket is like curved, kind of like a bowl, but it's
Interesting.
exactly like racquetball.
Never played that. To
Okay.
speak to your point, though, about tennis, I think one of the biggest issues is you absolutely do have to have someone else that knows how to play
Yeah.
because the ball's going everywhere. It's
Yep.
harder to keep it in. I mean, so you spend half your night chasing the ball down if it's someone that's inexperienced. Now, obviously, if it's someone you want to teach and you want to get them into it, yeah, you got to be patient in that respect. But I used to have a friend. Unfortunately, we drifted apart. We used to play tennis 3 nights a week.
Yep.
And
Yep.
he had played for years. I had played for years. So we were very competitive and we
Yeah.
had some
Exactly.
great matches. And him and I actually used to play racquetball together too. The
Yeah.
racquetball court that we went to closed down. And I think only a couple of the gyms here in Pittsburgh, to my knowledge. I could be wrong. There's probably a couple
Yeah.
other ones. But nevertheless, about 4 miles from my house, I know they just put up a bunch of pickleball courts. Maybe I'll just get a racket and go
Yeah.
hang out. And
Yeah.
I'm sure I could jump in a game and meet some new people, new
Yeah.
networking
Literally,
opportunities.
and if you play tennis, you'll probably get like pickleball on your first or second time.
Yeah.
So I think it's an easier skill to learn if you play tennis. One thing I'll ask you though, you're up north, right?
In Pittsburgh, yes.
Pittsburgh, cool. So I feel like with tennis, part of what frustrated me is I felt like I needed to play consistently. And if I didn't play consistently, I felt kind of like I was rusty. And then it'd be like, why am I investing this much time over the summer to like not play for like 6 months over the winter? And with pickleball, I love that there's way more indoor courts. So I can kind of like focus on building this community year round. I can play year
Mhm.
round. And so I like that about it, that there's just, it's really, in my area, it's really rare that there's a lot of indoor tennis courts because the weather's never super cold. But I love that
Yeah.
with pickleball, it's all indoor.
I'm gonna have to see how this goes. So I'm gonna test my chops in Charlotte with you guys. We'll play a little pickleball and see how it goes, and then
Yeah.
take it from there. But I'm looking forward to it, my friend. Well, Lloyd, this has been a lot of fun, and I want to thank you again for taking the time to jump in tonight and have this conversation. Really looking forward to meeting you in person when we come together in Charlotte. But for our viewing audience, give them a plug. Let them know where they can find you, how they can connect with you, so they can get even more value from the world of Lloyd George.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So you can find me on all social platforms at Lloyd, not George. That's LLOYD NOTGEORGE. I'm super excited to connect with anyone that was listening to this, and I'm all about building community. You can also check out the podcast conference at empoweredpodcasting.com. And Jason, what I'll actually just do is give you a few discounted tickets as well in case you want to give them to anyone in your community as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, we'll make it happen. The more the merrier. It's going to be a good party. And obviously, now that we've added this pickleball element to this, why you would not go buy a ticket is beyond me. So
Right,
go
right.
make it happen, folks. All right, Bomb Squad. This has been another installment of Let's Blow This Up Live. As I said, next week, the party continues as we continue talking about podcasting. This honestly was not planned. It just all came together this way, that all the folks behind the Empowered Podcasting Conference were lined up. Next week, it's Simona Cosentini, who is right now in Italy. I don't know the time change, but she's either wrist deep in some homemade pasta. She's getting my gabagool that I requested. I want authentic from Italy gabagool brought back and handed to me in North Carolina. Or
Literally.
she's sleeping. Again, not sure what time it is right there. But Simona's going to join me next week, and we're going to dive deep into her story. We're going to learn her role in building this great conference, and the clock will be officially ticking once that conversation concludes, because we'll be about a week away from Empowered Podcasting Live. Lloyd, thank you so much for being here. And to the Bomb Squad that was watching live, thank you very much. Again, we're here every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. And I look forward to having you here again next week. Also, I'll throw this plug out there too. If you want more of me live, I have been going live every day on the Bombtrack Media YouTube channel with Podcast Theory Live. Episode 3 just went live today as we speak. I'll be there Monday through Friday with fresh content for you to consume. So look forward to you joining me there. That can be interactive as well. So if you join me live, you can ask questions, drop comments, tell me I'm doing a good job. Tell me I'm doing a bad job, but please don't be a dick about this. Follow the YouTube channel. Click the bell so you know when I go live. If you're watching on Facebook or LinkedIn, do it there as well. My name is Jason Sircone, and we are going to sign off. This is Let's Blow This Up Live. And until next week, stay explosive. Good night.